The kiss at her doorstep lasted exactly 17 seconds. Dante counted because that's what his brilliant, broken brain did. And when Simone pulled back, her eyes were dark with recognition. Well, she breathed, that was everything. He should have agreed. Should have played it safe. But instead, the truth came out like a confession. I'm already planning when I can see you again. What I want to learn about you next. How to make sure you don't disappear. That's when she smiled and said the words that would either destroy him or save his life. Good, because I'm also terrible at casual. If you love stories where powerful men meet their match in fearless women, where cultural bridges are built one vulnerable moment at a time, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this love story doesn't play by anyone's rules but theirs. Dante Huang didn't believe in fate, coincidence, or divine intervention. He believed in algorithms, market analysis, and the predictable patterns of human behavior. Which was why the woman currently studying his abstract sculpture collection, with an expression of thoughtful criticism rather than awe, completely disrupted his evening. The Helix Gallery in Tribeca was hosting its quarterly exhibition, and as the primary investor, Dante's presence was mandatory despite his preference for spreadsheets over socializing. He'd positioned himself near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, a tactical location that allowed observation without participation. She'd arrived 20 minutes ago with a friend, a petite Asian woman who immediately gravitated toward the champagne. But this woman, this vision in an emerald wrap dress that honored every curve, had bypassed the wine entirely and gone straight to the art. She moved with purpose, her natural hair swept into an elegant updo that exposed the graceful column of her neck. Dante watched as she leaned closer to read the placard beside his favorite piece, a twisted bronze form titled Isolation, and he saw the exact moment recognition sparked in her dark eyes. Not recognition of the artist's name, but understanding of the work's meaning. It's about choice, isn't it? Her voice carried across the space, rich and unafraid. She wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, but her friend had wandered off, leaving her words floating directly toward him. Dante found himself moving before his analytical mind could advise against it. Most people think it's about loneliness. She turned, and the full force of her attention hit him like a physical thing. Up close, she was even more striking. High cheekbones, full lips curved in a knowing smile, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his tailored Tom Ford suit, his precisely styled hair, his careful mask of polite disinterest. Loneliness is something that happens to you, she said, tilting her head. This, she gestured to the sculpture. This is something you build around yourself. There's a difference. The accuracy of her observation should have made him retreat. Instead, Dante stepped closer. And which do you think is more tragic? Neither. She met his gaze without flinching. Both are survivable. The tragedy is when you convince yourself that survival is the same as living. That's remarkably philosophical for a gallery opening. And you're remarkably evasive for a man who just walked over to defend his favorite sculpture's honor. A smile tugged at his mouth before he could stop it. How did you know it was my favorite? You've been standing in front of that window for 30 minutes, but your eyes keep coming back to this piece. Every 90 seconds like clockwork. She extended her hand. Simone Parker, professor of literature at Columbia, amateur art critic, and apparently terrible at not calling people out. Her palm was warm against his, her handshake firm. Dante Huang, gallery investor, professional workaholic, and apparently transparent. Only to people who pay attention. Simone released his hand but didn't step back. Which is most people, but they're usually looking at the wrong things. And what should they be looking at? The spaces between. She moved to the next sculpture and Dante followed as if tethered. Artists spend so much time on the subject, but the real story is always in the negative space, what they chose to leave out, what they chose to protect. Dante's chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with his respiratory system and everything to do with being seen. You talk about art like you're reading people. Same skill set. Simone glanced at him sidelong. Both require paying attention to what's actually there versus what you want to see. And what do you see when you look at me, Professor Parker? She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. The gallery noise faded. Distant laughter, clinking glasses, meaningless chatter, until it felt like they were the only two people in the room. I see a man who built an empire before most people finish graduate school, who probably speaks 4 languages and can code in 6, who wears success like armor because somewhere along the way, he learned that being needed professionally is safer than being wanted personally. Dante's throat went dry. That's quite the character assessment from 30 seconds of conversation. 2 minutes and 40 seconds, actually. She smiled, but it was gentle rather than mocking. And I could be completely wrong. Maybe you're just a regular billionaire who likes art and really good suits. Billionaire is an exaggeration. Multimillionaire then, the principle stands. And what principle is that? That lonely recognizes lonely, Mr. Huang. Simone's voice softened. No matter how well dressed it is. Before Dante could respond, before his carefully constructed defenses could formulate an appropriately deflecting reply, her friend appeared at her elbow, slightly tipsy and completely oblivious to the charged atmosphere. Simone, they have mini quiches. Come try the truffle ones before they're gone. The woman tugged at Simone's arm, then seemed to notice Dante for the first time. Oh, sorry. Am I interrupting? No, Simone said, though her eyes remained on Dante. We were just finishing our discussion about negative space. Sounds boring, her friend declared cheerfully. Come on. Food. Simone let herself be pulled away, but not before reaching into her small clutch and producing a business card. She pressed it into Dante's hand. In case you want to continue the conversation, office hours are Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Or, her lips curved, you could just email like a normal person. Then she was gone, swept into the crowd, leaving Dante standing alone with a business card that read, Dr. Simone Parker, Associate Professor of Comparative Literature. And the uncomfortable realization that for the first time in years, he wanted to see someone again. Not needed to. Wanted to. The distinction terrified him. Dante waited exactly 48 hours before sending the email, not because he was playing games, but because he genuinely couldn't decide if reaching out was brilliant or catastrophic. His assistant, a hyper-competent woman named Grace, who'd been with him for 5 years, noticed his distraction immediately. You've read that market report 3 times without retaining a single word, she observed from the doorway of his corner office. Either the quantum computing sector is more boring than usual, or something else is occupying your brilliant mind. Dante closed his laptop. I met someone. Grace's eyebrows rose. A someone? As in a potential merger partner? Or a someone? The latter. This is unprecedented. She walked in, closing the door behind her. Grace was one of 3 people who'd seen behind Dante's professional mask, the others being his younger sister and his childhood friend who now ran their West Coast operations. Tell me everything. There's nothing to tell. We talked for 5 minutes at the gallery opening. She's a literature professor. She's direct. Direct is good. You hate games. She's also incredibly perceptive in a way that's mildly alarming. Even better. You need someone who can keep up with you intellectually. Grace perched on the edge of his desk. So what's the problem? Dante ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its careful styling. The usual problem. The one that's ended every relationship I've attempted since grad school. Understanding flickered across Grace's face. Ah, the you're perfect, but I can't handle your intensity problem. Among other intensity-related issues, yes. Dante. Grace's voice turned serious. You're 32, not 92. You can't resign yourself to solitude because a few people couldn't match your energy. It wasn't a few. It was everyone. Every woman who's been attracted to the idea of me has run the moment they encountered the reality. Then they were the wrong women. She stood, smoothing her skirt. Send the email. Worst case scenario, she doesn't respond. Best case, you discover someone who isn't intimidated by brilliance. After Grace left, Dante opened his laptop and began typing. Dr. Parker. I've been thinking about your observation regarding negative space and protection. You were right. The most revealing aspect of any work is often what the creator chooses to omit. I find myself curious about what you choose to protect. If you're willing to risk another philosophical conversation with a transparently lonely billionaire, your accuracy regarding my net worth was unsettling, by the way. I'd like to take you to dinner. There's a Korean fusion restaurant in the West Village that specializes in impossible pairings that somehow work. The metaphor is not lost on me. Dante Huang. Her response came 3 hours later. Mr. Huang. First, I'm pleased my net worth estimation was close. I was actually being conservative. Second, I appreciate a man who can acknowledge metaphorical subtext without belaboring it. Third, yes to dinner, but fair warning. I have opinions about Korean fusion, and not all of them are polite. Also, please stop calling yourself lonely in your emails. It's simultaneously accurate and heartbreaking, and I'm not sure I'm emotionally prepared for both. Tuesday at 7? Simone. Dante found himself smiling at his screen, a genuine, unguarded expression that would have shocked anyone from his office. He typed back immediately, Tuesday at 7, I'll send a car. And Simone? Your inability to ignore someone's loneliness is showing. The metaphor is not lost on me. The restaurant, Hanok Seoul, occupied a converted brownstone with a rooftop garden and a chef who'd trained in both Seoul and New Orleans. Dante had reserved the entire top floor, not to be ostentatious, but because he'd learned that meaningful conversations required privacy. Simone arrived precisely on time, wearing black slacks and a silk blouse the color of wine. Her hair was down tonight, natural curls framing her face in a way that made his fingers itch to touch. This is beautiful, she said, taking in the paper lanterns and the carefully curated space. Then her eyes sharpened. And completely private. Should I be concerned that you've arranged a dinner where no one can hear me scream? You could call for help, Dante pointed out, pulling out her chair. The staff is downstairs. True. And I did tell 3 friends where I was going tonight. Complete with photos of your business card. She sat, graceful and unafraid. So if you're a serial killer, you're a very poorly planned one. Comforting. He took his own seat across from her. For what it's worth, I'm not a serial killer. Just a man who values conversation without interruption. And who has enough money to make that preference a reality. Simone accepted the wine list from their server, a quiet young man who poured water and disappeared. Let me guess. You don't drink? I drink. Moderately. But I'm told I'm more tolerable sober. Who told you that? Everyone who's ever been to a party with me. Simone laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Let me guess. You attend social functions like they're military operations. Arrive at the designated time, execute required pleasantries, extract yourself at the earliest acceptable moment. You've been talking to Grace? Who's Grace? My assistant, also my professional keeper and personal therapist. Smart man, having a woman keep you organized. Simone studied the wine list. Tell me about this impossible pairing philosophy. What makes you think we're compatible? The question was direct, challenging. Dante appreciated it. You're a literature professor who reads people like texts. I'm a tech entrepreneur who reads people like data sets. Different languages, same skill. That's a professional compatibility argument? You're right. He leaned forward. Let me try again. You walked into a room full of people performing sophistication and went straight to the art. Ignored the performance, focused on the substance. That suggests you value authenticity over appearance. Or that I really like art. You like truth, Dante corrected. Art was just the medium, and He paused, choosing words carefully. I've spent most of my adult life building something that looks perfect from the outside while feeling hollow on the inside. I think you'd call that a compelling narrative tension. Simone set down the wine list, giving him her complete attention. What would you call it? Lonely. The word sat between them, honest and raw. There you go again, Simone said softly. Being devastatingly direct about emotional things while maintaining perfect posture and a completely calm expression. It's disconcerting. Would you prefer I lie? I'd prefer you explain why a man who has everything most people dream of feels hollow. Their server returned, and they ordered, Simone choosing the chef's tasting menu with a confidence that suggested either extensive culinary knowledge or complete trust in strangers. Probably both. When they were alone again, Dante found himself speaking truths he rarely acknowledged even internally. Success is easy when you have the right combination of intelligence, work ethic, and timing. I had all three. Built my first successful algorithm at 23, sold my first company at 25, and built a second empire by 30. He traced the rim of his water glass. But success in tech requires a specific kind of intensity. You have to think faster, work longer, care more than everyone around you. It becomes your entire identity. And people found that intimidating? Simone filled in. People found it exhausting. I don't have an off switch, Simone. When I commit to something, a project, a relationship, a conversation, I commit completely. I want to know everything, understand everything, optimize everything. Including people? Especially people. He met her eyes. Which is why this dinner is either the best idea I've had in years or a spectacular mistake. Because I already want to know everything about you, and we've had exactly one previous conversation. Instead of looking alarmed, Simone smiled. Ask me anything. Why literature? Specifically, why comparative literature? Because stories are how humans make sense of chaos. We're meaning-making machines, and narrative is our primary tool. She accepted her first course, something delicate with microgreens. Comparative lit lets me see how different cultures construct meaning differently. Same human experiences, wildly different narrative frameworks. And what meaning have you constructed from your own story? That I'm good at reading people but terrible at reading red flags in relationships. That I love my work more than is probably healthy. That I'm 31, unmarried, and completely fine with it despite my mother's increasing concern. She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. And that I have a bad habit of being attracted to complicated men who mistake intensity for intimacy. Dante felt his chest tighten. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're testing me to see if I'll run. Simone's gaze was steady, unflinching. Which suggests you've been run from before, probably multiple times. Probably by people who claimed they wanted intensity but actually wanted the aesthetic of it. The perfect boyfriend who texts constantly and plans elaborate dates, but doesn't actually demand anything emotionally challenging. You've done this analysis quickly. I'm good at my job. And my job is reading subtext. They continued through 6 courses, each one a study in balance, spicy and sweet, traditional and innovative, familiar and foreign. Much like their conversation, which ranged from childhood in Seoul for him and Atlanta for her, to graduate school disasters, to the specific loneliness of being exceptional in ways that isolate rather than connect. By dessert, a deconstructed hotdog with black sesame ice cream, Dante realized he'd talked more about himself in 2 hours than he had in the past 2 years combined. This was a mistake, he said quietly. Simone's fork paused midway to her mouth. The dinner? No. The dinner was perfect. The mistake was thinking I could approach this casually. I'm already invested, Simone. Already planning when I can see you again, what I want to learn about you next, how to make sure you don't disappear. He forced himself to maintain eye contact. That's what always happens. Women are attracted to the package. The success, the looks, the perfect execution of romance. Then they meet the actual person, and the intensity is too much. I'm too much. Simone set down her fork deliberately. Dante, look at me. He did. I'm going to say this once, and I need you to really hear it. I don't scare easily. I'm a Black woman who earned tenure at an Ivy League university before 35. I've navigated spaces that weren't designed for me, conversations that weren't meant to include me, and systems that actively work against people who look like me. So when you tell me you're too much, what I hear is that you've been with people who were too little. The words landed like a physical impact. I'm not saying we're going to ride off into the sunset, Simone continued. I'm saying I'm willing to find out if this intensity you're so worried about is actually compatibility in disguise. But I need you to stop apologizing for wanting things deeply. It's not a flaw. It's just your operating system. Dante found himself unable to speak for a moment, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance in her voice. "I want to see you again," he finally managed. "Good. Because I want that too." She smiled. "But fair warning, I'm also intense, I'm also demanding, and I'm also terrible at casual. So if we're doing this, we're doing it honestly." "Honestly how?" "Honestly, like, I think you're brilliant and beautiful, and your loneliness makes me want to build you a fortress of belonging. But I also think you're so used to managing everyone else's comfort that you've forgotten how to ask for what you want." "What makes you think I don't ask?" "Because in 2 conversations and 1 dinner, you haven't told me a single thing you need, only what you're afraid of giving." The observation hit so accurately that Dante had to look away. "So here's what I want," Simone said, her voice gentle but firm. "I want you to take me home, to my apartment, not yours, because I'm not ready for that level of vulnerability yet. I want you to kiss me goodnight if the moment feels right, and I want you to text me tomorrow morning, not because it's strategic or optimal, but because you're thinking about me. I'm always going to be thinking about you. Then this should be easy." She stood, extending her hand. "Come on, Mr. Huang, let's see if you're as good at following instructions as you are at giving them." Dante took her hand, let her pull him up, and followed her downstairs like a man who'd just discovered that protection and pursuit could flow in both directions. The kiss happened on Simone's doorstep in Morningside Heights, her brownstone apartment building framed by trees just beginning to turn autumn gold. Dante had accompanied her in the car, their driver maintaining professional distance while they talked about everything and nothing. Books she was teaching, algorithms he was developing, the strange intimacy of New York at night. Now they stood in the soft glow of her porch light, and Dante realized he'd never been nervous about kissing someone before. "You're overthinking it," Simone observed. "I'm thinking about it exactly the right amount." "Which is?" "Enough to not mess it up." She laughed, stepping closer. "Here's a secret, Dante. You can't mess it up if the other person wants it just as much as you do." Then she rose on her toes. She was tall, but he was taller, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, testing, then deeper, more certain. Simone's hand came up to cup his jaw, and Dante felt his careful control fracture. He pulled her closer, his hands finding the curve of her waist, feeling her melt against him like she'd been designed to fit exactly there. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Simone's eyes were dark with desire and something else. Something that looked like recognition. "Well," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. "That was everything," Dante finished. "I was going to say promising, but sure. We can go with everything." She smiled, stepping back reluctantly. "Text me in the morning." "Count on it." He, waited until she was safely inside before returning to the car, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with hope. The next 6 weeks unfolded like a study in gradual integration. Dante discovered that Simone's intensity matched his own, but expressed differently. Where he consumed information and people with analytical precision, she approached the world with emotional intelligence that bordered on supernatural. She remembered details, not just facts, but feelings. The way he took his coffee, black, single origin, slightly cooler than most people preferred. The specific language he used when stressed versus relaxed. The topics that made his eyes light up versus the ones that made his shoulders tense. And she called him on his patterns. "You do this thing," she said one evening as they walked through Central Park, "where you solve problems for people before they ask for help. It's sweet, but also controlling." Dante frowned. "I'm trying to be helpful. You're trying to be necessary. There's a difference." She squeezed his hand. "I appreciate the instinct, but sometimes I just want to complain about my department head without you strategizing solutions. That seems inefficient. It's called emotional processing, darling. Not everything needs optimization." He was learning, slowly. They established rhythms. Tuesday dinners at her favorite Ethiopian restaurant. Thursday study sessions where she graded papers in his office while he coded. Weekends that sometimes involved carefully planned dates, and sometimes involved her dragging him to poetry readings in Brooklyn that he pretended to tolerate, but secretly loved. Simone met Grace, who approved immediately. "She's perfect for you," his assistant declared after Simone had left his office one afternoon. "She doesn't take your brooding seriously." "I don't brood." "You absolutely brood. You just do it in expensive suits while making millions." Dante met Simone's best friend Kennedy, a sharp-witted engineer who grilled him over cocktails about his intentions, while Simone watched with amusement. "He's serious about you," Kennedy reported back to Simone, loud enough for Dante to hear. "I can tell because he's answering questions like he's defending a dissertation." "That's just how he communicates," Simone said, but she was smiling. But beneath the building intimacy, Dante felt the familiar pattern emerging. The one where everything seemed perfect until it wasn't. The one where the woman he cared about would eventually realize that his intensity wasn't charming. It was consuming. The shift happened on a Friday evening. They'd been seeing each other for 6 weeks, and Dante had been invited to a university function honoring Simone's latest publication, a book analyzing diaspora narratives in contemporary literature. He'd RSVP'd immediately, cleared his schedule, prepared thoughtful questions about her work. What he hadn't prepared for was watching her shine in her professional element and feeling simultaneously proud and terrified. She was magnetic, holding court with colleagues, discussing theory with graduate students, laughing with departmental rivals who couldn't help but respect her brilliance. She belonged to a world that had nothing to do with him, where his money and influence meant nothing, where she was the center of gravity. And Dante realized, watching her, that falling for her had been easy. Letting her be independent might destroy him. The reception was winding down when Simone found him standing alone by the windows, his expression carefully neutral in a way she'd learned meant emotional turbulence. "You've been quiet all evening," she said, sliding her hand into his. "What's going on in that brilliant, complicated head?" Dante looked at their joined hands, then at her face, flushed with success, glowing with belonging, and felt the truth claw its way up his throat. "I'm trying very hard not to ask you to leave your colleagues early so I can have you to myself." Which is irrational, possessive, and exactly the kind of intensity I promised I wouldn't. Simone pressed a finger to his lips. "Stop. We're having this conversation, but not here." She glanced around at the thinning crowd. "Give me 10 minutes to say goodbye. Then we're going to your place. And you're going to tell me everything you've been holding back." "Simone. Everything, Dante. No more protecting me from yourself." She walked away before he could respond, leaving him standing there with the uncomfortable certainty that whatever happened next would determine whether this relationship survived or became another casualty of his inability to love in moderation. 10 minutes later, they were in his car. 20 minutes after that, they were in his penthouse apartment. A minimalist space of glass and steel that reflected light without generating warmth. Simone stood in his living room, taking in the expensive emptiness. "You don't actually live here, do you? You exist here. It serves its purpose. Which is? A place to sleep between work." "Dante." She turned to face him. "Talk to me. What happened tonight?" And finally, he let the truth spill out. "I watched you tonight," Dante began, his voice low and controlled. "And I realized that I'm not afraid of you leaving me because you can't handle my intensity. I'm afraid you'll leave because you don't need me at all." Simone's expression softened. "That's what this is about? Independence?" "You were brilliant tonight, completely self-sufficient, thriving in a world where I'm just an accessory." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect style. "And I know that's healthy. I know that's how adult relationships should function. But everything in me wants to be essential to you. Not optional. Not convenient. Essential." "Dante? I want to solve every problem you mentioned before you finish the sentence. I want to know your schedule so thoroughly that I can anticipate your needs before you articulate them. I want to be the person you call first. Need first. Think of first." He finally met her eyes. "And I know that's too much. I know it's the exact intensity that's driven everyone else away. But I can't seem to calibrate it. I only know how to want completely or not at all. Simone walked to him slowly, deliberately. When she reached him, she took his face in both hands, forcing him to maintain eye contact. Listen very carefully, she said. I don't want you calibrated. I don't want you moderate or measured or any other diminished version of yourself. I want exactly this. The man who learns my coffee order after one date, who reads my academic papers without being asked, who shows up to department functions like he's guarding something precious. That's possessive. That's devotion. She stroked her thumb across his cheekbone. And here's what you need to understand. I'm not other women. I'm not going to be frightened by a man who wants me completely, because I want you the exact same way. The difference is, I'm not afraid of it. You should be, Dante said roughly, because once I let myself need you, Simone, I won't know how to stop. Good. She pulled his face down to hers. Then don't. The kiss was different this time, not exploratory or tentative, but claiming. Dante felt something break loose in his chest, some final restraint snapping. His hands found her waist, pulling her flush against him, and Simone made a sound low in her throat that destroyed his remaining control. Bedroom, she breathed against his mouth. Now. They barely made it. Dante's apartment suddenly felt miles wide, every step an exercise in restraint. When they finally reached his bedroom, all dark wood and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Simone pushed him down to sit on the edge of the bed. I want something clear between us, she said, standing between his knees, her hands on his shoulders. You're not too much. You've never been too much. You've been exactly enough for someone who is capable of matching you. Which is me. Simone. I'm not finished. Her voice was gentle but firm. I see you, Dante. Not the billionaire, not the genius, not the perfect execution of success. I see the man who's convinced himself that loving completely is a liability instead of a gift. And I'm telling you right now, you can bring me all of it. The intensity, the possessiveness, the need to solve and protect and know everything. I can handle it. How can you be sure? Because I'm not afraid of being wanted. She cupped his face. And because I want you exactly as desperately. Dante pulled her down into his lap, and she came willingly, straddling him with a grace that made his breath catch. Tell me, he demanded. Tell me what you want. You, all of you, the brilliant mind, the careful control, the intensity you've been holding back. She kissed him between words. Stop protecting me from yourself. I'm not fragile. No, he agreed, his hands sliding up her thighs. You're magnificent. They moved together like they'd been designed for this. All heat and hunger, and the exquisite relief of finally letting go. Dante discovered that Simone was exactly as intense as he was, demanding and generous in equal measure. She mapped his body with the same focus she brought to everything, learning what made him gasp, what made him groan, what made him lose the careful control he'd maintained for decades. Look at me, she commanded at one point, and when he did, she smiled. There you are, the real you. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, Simone's head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. I need to tell you something, Dante said quietly, and I need you to not laugh. I'm not promising anything, but proceed. I've been alone for a long time, not just single, alone. I convinced myself it was better that way. Safer. More efficient. He felt her hand spread across his heart. And then, you walked into that gallery, and saw through every defense I'd built, and I realized I'd been protecting myself from the wrong thing. What were you protecting yourself from? Disappointment. The inevitable moment when someone I cared about would realize I was too demanding, too intense, too much work. He kissed the top of her head. But you're right. They weren't too fragile. They were too little. And I don't want to live in that protected space anymore. Simone propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him with an expression that made his chest ache. Then don't. Live here instead. With me. In this messy, intense, completely unprotected space where we get to want each other without apology. I'm going to be possessive, he warned. I know. I'm going to want to solve all your problems. I'll let you solve some of them. I'm going to fall completely, irrevocably in love with you. Simone smiled. Too late. Already happened, for both of us. For 3 weeks they existed in a bubble of belonging. Dante learned to balance his need to protect with Simone's need for autonomy. Simone learned that accepting help wasn't weakness. They found their rhythm. Intense but sustainable, devoted but not consuming. Then Dr. Marcus Whitfield entered the picture, and everything shifted. Whitfield was a visiting scholar from Oxford, brought in to lead a prestigious lecture series on post-colonial literature. He was also, Simone explained over dinner one Tuesday, a brilliant academic with a reputation for intellectual rigor and absolutely no social grace. He's basically you without the emotional intelligence, she said, spearing a piece of injera, which makes departmental meetings excruciating. Does he know you're seeing someone? Simone gave him a look. We're not in middle school, Dante. I don't need to declare my relationship status to colleagues. That's not what I asked. No, it's what you meant. She softened. Yes, he knows. I mentioned you during our first department meeting. He seemed uninterested, which is his default state regarding anything non-academic. Dante nodded, but something in his gut twisted uncomfortably. He'd built an empire on reading patterns, and there was a pattern here he didn't like, even if he couldn't articulate it yet. The first incident happened on a Thursday. Simone had invited him to her office to meet for lunch, and when Dante arrived, he found her in the hallway engaged in heated debate with a white man in his 50s, wearing the academic uniform of rumpled blazer and expensive watch. Simply saying that your interpretation of Said is reductive, the man was saying. You're applying contemporary frameworks to historical. I'm applying rigorous analysis to colonial apologism disguised as scholarship, Simone interrupted coolly, which you'd recognize if you weren't so invested in protecting the canon. The man's face reddened. That's an unfair characterization. Dr. Whitfield. Dante's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Both scholars turned to look at him. I believe you're blocking the hallway. Whitfield's eyes narrowed. And you are? Late for lunch. Dante moved to Simone's side, his presence deliberately protective. Simone, are we still on for that restaurant reservation? She smiled, recognizing the tactical extraction. Absolutely, Dr. Whitfield will continue this discussion in the faculty meeting, where you'll have the opportunity to defend your position in front of our colleagues. They walked away, leaving Whitfield staring after them. Once they were outside, Simone exhaled slowly. Thank you for that. He's been challenging every point I make in meetings for the past 2 weeks. Why? Because I'm younger, black, and a woman who doesn't defer to his supposed expertise. She shook her head. Academia is full of Marcus Whitfields, men who mistake credentials for wisdom. He was disrespectful. He was typical. She took Dante's hand. But I can handle it. I've been handling it my entire career. Dante said nothing, but his mind was already working. Analyzing. Planning. The second incident was worse. Simone had submitted an article to a prestigious journal, one that Whitfield sat on the editorial board of. When the rejection came back, it was brutal. Not just declining publication, but attacking the premise, methodology, and even Simone's qualifications to write on the subject. Dante found her in her apartment on a Saturday morning, surrounded by printed rejection letters and notes, her eyes red from crying. He torpedoed it, she said flatly. The rejection was signed by the board, but the language is pure Whitfield. He went after my work because I embarrassed him in that hallway. Dante felt rage crystallize in his chest, cold, calculated, absolute. Give me the journal's name. What? No. Dante, I'm not letting you solve this with money. I'm not offering money. He knelt beside her chair. I'm offering information. The kind of information that makes academic bullies think twice before weaponizing editorial boards. That's... She stopped. What kind of information? The kind I have access to through entirely legal channels. Background checks, publication history, patterns of behavior. His voice was deadly calm. Men like Whitfield don't suddenly become academic saboteurs. They have histories, paper trails, other victims. You want to investigate him? I want to protect you. Dante cupped her face. Not by fighting your battles, but by giving you the weapons to fight them yourself. Let me find out who else he's done this to. Let me build you a case. Simone stared at him for a long moment. This is the possessive intensity you warned me about. Yes. The part where you solve problems I didn't ask you to solve. Yes. The part where you can't just let me be hurt without doing something about it. Correct. She leaned forward, kissing him fiercely. Then do it. But we do it together. This is my fight, Dante. You're just my very brilliant, slightly terrifying backup. It took Dante 72 hours to build a file on Marcus Whitfield that was both comprehensive and damning. 3 junior faculty members who'd left the department after he'd sabotaged their tenure reviews. 5 female scholars who'd filed formal complaints about intellectual harassment. A pattern of targeting academics whose work challenged his preferred canonical frameworks. Simone read through it all, her expression growing harder with each page. He's been doing this for 20 years, she said quietly. How has no one stopped him? Because he's careful. He doesn't leave explicit evidence, just patterns that individuals can dismiss as academic disagreement. Dante pointed to a specific section. But patterns become proof when you compile them. What do I do with this? Whatever you want. Give it to your department chair, file a formal complaint, send it to the University Ethics Board. He met her eyes. Or let me leak it to academic press outlets who'd love to cover the story of a prestigious Oxford scholar using editorial positions to punish scholars who challenge him. That's nuclear. He tried to destroy your career. I'm offering proportional response. Simone stood, pacing her small living room. If I do this, if I go after him formally, it's going to be ugly. He'll fight back. He has institutional power, connections, decades of built-up academic capital. And you have truth, documentation, and a partner who will move heaven and earth to make sure your voice is heard. Dante stood, crossing to her. But this is your choice, Simone. I'm not making it for you. She looked up at him, and he saw the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of costs and benefits, the risk assessment. I want to fight, she said finally. But I want to fight smart. Can you help me craft a formal complaint that's legally bulletproof? Already drafted. He pulled out his phone, sending her a document. 3 versions, actually. 1 for the department chair, 1 for the University Ethics Board, and 1 for the journal's parent organization, each tailored to the specific institutional language and accountability structures. Simone read through the documents, and when she looked up, her eyes were bright with something that looked like wonder. You did this in 3 days? I did this in 8 hours. I spent the rest of the time verifying sources and consulting with an employment attorney who specializes in academic discrimination cases. Why? Because you're mine to protect. The words came out fierce, possessive. Not in a way that diminishes you, but in a way that gives you armor. You fight your own battles, Simone. I just make sure you're never fighting alone. She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her face into his chest. This is why people were intimidated by you. This intensity. I know. They were idiots. She pulled back to look at him. This isn't scary. This is what love looks like when it's actually committed. The formal complaint process took 6 weeks. During that time, Simone faced exactly the backlash she'd predicted. Whispers in faculty meetings, colleagues suddenly too busy to collaborate, the subtle isolation that academic departments inflict on troublemakers. But she also found unexpected allies. The 3 junior faculty members Dante had identified reached out privately, offering testimony. 2 emerged publicly, detailing their own experiences with Whitfield's sabotage. The story gained traction in academic circles, then mainstream press. Through it all, Dante was her constant, not hovering, but present. He showed up to campus when she needed visible support. He stayed away when she needed space, to fight her own battles. He read every draft of every statement she prepared, offering strategic advice without trying to control the narrative. You're getting better at this, she observed one evening as they reviewed her testimony for the ethics board hearing. At what? Being supportive without being controlling, offering help without assuming I need rescuing. It's harder than building companies, he admitted, but more important. The hearing itself was grueling. 3 hours of testimony, cross-examination, and institutional bureaucracy. Dante waited outside, pacing the hallway like a caged tiger. When Simone finally emerged, exhausted but composed, he was there immediately. Well? They're opening a formal investigation. Whitfield is suspended pending review. She sagged against him. It's not victory, but it's accountability. That's better than victory, that's change. 2 weeks later, Marcus Whitfield resigned from both his position and all editorial boards. The journal that had rejected Simone's article issued a formal apology and invited resubmission. More importantly, the university revised its policies on academic harassment and editorial conflicts of interest. You did that, Dante said when Simone showed him the policy changes. You changed the system. We did that, she corrected. You gave me the tools. I wielded them. Perfect partnership. Getting there. Spring arrived in New York with the kind of warmth that made the city feel possible again. Dante and Simone had been together for 6 months, long enough to navigate crisis, but more importantly, long enough to build the kind of daily intimacy that sustained everything else. He'd learned to ask for what he needed instead of just anticipating hers. She'd learned to accept help without viewing it as weakness. They'd found their balance. Intense, but not consuming. Devoted, but not dependent. One Saturday morning, Dante woke to find Simone already awake, watching him, with an expression he couldn't quite read. What? He asked, his voice sleep-rough. I'm moving in with you. He blinked. That wasn't a question. No, it was a statement. I'm moving in with you because I love you, because I want to wake up next to you every morning, and because my lease is up in 2 months, and your apartment needs someone who actually lives in it instead of just existing there. Dante sat up, fully awake now. You're serious? Completely. But I have conditions. Of course you do. 1. We redecorate. This minimalist tech bro aesthetic is depressing. 2. I get office space for my writing and you don't enter without knocking. 3. We host dinner parties because your isolation era is over. 4. She cupped his face. 4. You keep being exactly this honest about what you need and want. No more protecting me from your intensity. I can agree to all of that. Good. Because I also have a proposal. Another one? Different kind. She took a breath. I want you to meet my family. My mother, my aunts, my impossibly judgmental grandmother who's going to have opinions about you dating outside your race. Dante felt something shift in his chest. You want me to meet your family. I want to integrate our lives completely, which means you meet the people who made me, and I meet your sister who you've been carefully keeping separate from this relationship. Mincio is protective. So is my mother. They'll either love each other or form a protective alliance against us. Either way, we're doing this. Simone's voice softened. You don't get to keep parts of yourself separate anymore, Dante. I'm in this completely, which means I need you to be too. 1 year later, Dante stood in front of the full-length windows of their apartment. No longer his apartment, but theirs, watching the sunset paint the city gold. Outside, the city continued its endless motion, millions of people moving through their own stories of connection and isolation, belonging and loneliness. But inside their apartment, in the space they'd built together from honesty and intensity, and the refusal to love in moderation, 2 people who'd spent years protecting themselves had finally found what protection was actually for. Not to keep love out, but to keep it safe once it arrived. If this story reminded you that intensity isn't a flaw, it's a frequency waiting for the right match, hit that subscribe button and join a community that celebrates deep love, cultural fusion, and the kind of romance that doesn't apologize for wanting everything. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit hardest, and share this with someone who needs to hear that being too much just means you haven't met your match yet. Until next time, remember, the right person won't ask you to dim your light. They'll just bring their own brightness and dare you to shine together.